So my experience with the primary was like nothing I'd ever had before. I showed up at a local library expecting maybe there would be 20 people. I think there were like 150 people in this library meeting room. It was unbelievable, the energy. And all of a sudden you knew you were sort of jumping into the deep end of something you'd never been in before. And I don't really even remember. That was early March. The end of voter registration was 3 or 4 weeks later, and suddenly we were all instant experts in voter registration and how to get forms and where to stand and how to not get kicked out of a supermarket parking lot. And then all of a sudden it was like the primary was the election itself, so we were doing persuasion and we were knocking on doors. But the main thing we were doing was making really intense friendships with people in our community that we would have never, ever, ever met. And so I had an experience, well, let me put it this way. On the night of the primary, we all ended up back in headquarters for Delaware County, and there were just, I don't know, maybe, there were hundreds of people there. And my husband, who wasn't really active in the campaign because he was too busy cleaning and cooking, taking care of our daughter while I was gone all the time, he came with me. And afterwards he said he'd never ever been in a group of people where there was that much diversity in terms of racial and ethnicity, but clearly it didn't matter. So one of my friends from New York who'd come down to help for the primary, when we found out we won Delaware County, she was embraced by a very, very large African-American woman who she had never met in her life, who told her completely sincerely, "I love you." And here my friend from New York, who'd never met her, was like, "I'm glad." But it wasn't the kind of experience anybody had ever had before, that all the categories we usually had, we just didn't care about. It wasn't important. We had just won our county.
I think, too, that along with what you said about all those experiences, I think it was just a collection of people who did things that they never thought they could do. People that walked in, on my experience, having never been involved in anything political and having in the past, prior to that, been a Republican, walked in, felt really convinced that I needed to do something, and I said what I've heard hundreds of times after that in the general election, and it was, I would chuckle when I would hear it because I knew I'd said the same thing. I want to do something to help, but I don't want to knock on people's doors, and I don't want to make phone calls. And everybody said that, and they welcomed me in and said, "Don't worry, we'll find something for you to do." And the next day when I came back in, they just told me to go make some phone calls. And I was afraid to say no, so I did it, and then once I did it, I did what everybody else did. You did it, and then you felt like, I can't stop. If I'm doing anything else, it can't be as important as this, and I had to keep coming every day. And then when the primary ended, the other thing, and I know Marilee felt the same way, the overwhelming thrill of it, but then also the loss of the work in that gap in time before we started to work back on the general election was hard. We really wanted to continue, and in fact we want to continue now. We are the people that Barack had hoped we would be, because we don't want to stop. We want to continue to organize and make Barack's plans come true. And so who would have ever thought that all of us, people that had never done that before, would be saying that now, when we were the same people that were afraid to make a phone call 6 months ago, 9 months ago.
And Mary Nell, I think one of the things, and you're right, it's happening now after the general, and it happened after the primary. We suddenly discovered that along with trying to get this guy elected, we had made these incredibly close friends. So we had this little tiny staging location office in media after the primary, and there was no staff left, but the volunteers all kind of just started lurking there, and we called it our clubhouse, and we would make fun of each other, but we just really wanted to come see each other. And we knew that the general might be coming, so there was still, like, the train was still on the track. It had just slowed down a little bit. But now, you know, we're really having to shift gears, but we still know we have all these friends.
Still have the core group.
You know, so I'll come over and bother Mary Nell whether we have somebody to elect or not.
That's right. And I think for my husband, for John, it was an example, too, of people finding all kinds of different ways to get involved. You know, there were the people, like John was a driver. I mean, you could talk about some of the experiences
I became a registration form expert, too.
That's right, that's right. there were so many different jobs that just came out of the brains of either the volunteers or the staffers that came that were all new to it. Almost all of them were new to it too. But we just figured out, for example, what John did. We knew we registered so many voters. What if there was a problem with those registrations? So he spent months logging all those registrations, scanning those registrations, putting them in order in case we needed it. Thank God we didn't. Thank God it went smoothly here on election day. But we didn't have a massive problem. But we were ready if we did. It was pretty amazing what we came up with.
And like trying to cobble together teams when you were never quite sure what the job was, number one. You weren't really sure what people could do well. But the same people, the most dedicated people, kept showing up. And after a week or two, you just kind of start falling into, okay, you do that role good, and I do this role good, and here's this poor lost soul who doesn't do any role good, but we're all going to help her along too. And it was just like watching this human, you know, one of those machines that has all those cogs and wheels and kind of toy machines. I feel like that's who we were. All these odd personalities together got this guy elected.
And it got bigger and bigger and bigger. One of the most exciting things of all that we all worked on together as the general got towards the end was so many volunteers, so many people, that we ended up at GOTV weekend with, I have to say, too many volunteers. We knew we had too many. We had so much excitement. We had more people than we had work, but we figured out what they could do, and we just had them do other things and go back out and go back out, and then we started to move people out of our area into other areas, and it just all came together, and then we got to celebrate at the end. It was great. It was great.
There was a couple of times in that last week where some of us, like really hardcore, like us and a couple other people that you probably talked to, we would just look around at the headquarters and all like this just hive of activity, this hive of really good vibes. I mean, even when we were exhausted, we kind of all, not to be too sappy, we kind of loved each other.
Right.
And you loved people you hadn't hardly even met, but they'd been there for the last 5 days, and you loved them for that. And I remember looking at you and a couple people and going, what are we going to do after this is over? So here I am in her living room, still having
and we're working on plans for a day of service and figuring out how we're going to all reunite at the inauguration if we're going, or how we're going to watch it together, and we're going to help our community.
And we just heard Barack's economic speech today, and I was thinking, should we be doing something right now to help him with this stimulus steamroller that we've got to get going, and we'll be talking about that. Yeah, I need to go shopping for Barack. How hard is that?
Yeah, it feels like it was a once in a lifetime experience, but hopefully not. Hopefully it's something that we can continue.
And maybe next time we'll know how to do it a little better than.
That's right.
I think we did all right.
We did.
We
did. Felt like we weren't knowing what we were doing.
Oh, we didn't know what we were doing, but we did all right.
We certainly did. And we'll be ready for him when he needs us in 4 years, too, to get him reelected.
Yeah, I have a feeling he might need us before that, though.
Oh, I think he needs us for community all along, nonstop. But when it comes time to reorganize to make sure he gets another 4 years, we'll be ready.
We will. And we'll be pros by then.
Is that good?
It's great.